Welcome back, and thank you for tuning in to HK Cheating Stories. We appreciate each and every one of you joining us. Where in the world are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Now, let's get the story started. They say a man doesn't truly know his own strength until he's forced to fight for what matters most. My name is Ethan Carter, and for 10 years, I thought I was building a life with the woman I loved. I ignored the signs, the distance, the quiet betrayals. But the moment she stepped off that plane, her hand in his, I knew. I wasn't just losing my wife. I was losing everything. She thought I would stay silent, that I would let her rewrite our story. She was wrong. Because that day, as she smiled, believing she had won, I had already set my plan in motion. And when revenge is served, it's always cold. 10 years of lies. 10 years of disrespect. And finally, one betrayal too many. Olivia thought I would never fight back. She thought I was the quiet, obedient husband, the man who would simply accept whatever she did, no matter how cruel. She was wrong. I remember the moment she sealed her fate. It wasn't just the fact that she was leaving. It was how she did it. She stood in the doorway of our home, suitcase in one hand, phone in the other, completely unbothered. "Try not to burn the house down while I'm gone," she joked, flashing that fake, condescending smile. I forced myself to stay calm. I even managed to smile back. "Have fun," I said. "Don't worry about a thing." She had no idea. No idea that I had already contacted a lawyer. No idea that the divorce papers were being prepared. No idea that by the time she returned, I would no longer be her husband. She didn't ask me to drive her to the airport. Of course, she didn't. That honor was reserved for Daniel, the man she thought I was too blind to notice. He pulled up in his sleek black Mercedes, honked twice, and she practically skipped toward the car, rolling her suitcase behind her. She didn't even glance back at me. Not once. I stood on the porch, watching as the car disappeared down the street. Then, I walked inside and got to work. I called Logan Wells, my lawyer, a man with a reputation for being ruthless in the courtroom. He picked up on the second ring. "She's gone," he asked, wasting no time. "Just left," I confirmed. "Good. That gives us a head start. I want her served the moment she steps off that plane." Logan had been waiting for this. He had seen cases like mine before. Men who had been financially and emotionally bled dry by women who never respected them. But Logan wasn't just taking my case for the money. No, he had his own reasons. A past grudge with Olivia's law firm. He wanted revenge just as much as I did. "Let's go over everything again," he said. I sat down at my desk, my hands steady despite the storm raging inside me. "She controls most of the money. She makes nearly 10 times what I do. I've been paying the mortgage while she hoards her earnings. There's no prenup." Logan laughed. "That's the best news I've heard all day. She thinks she's untouchable, but trust me, Ethan, you're in a much stronger position than you realize. If we play this right, you'll walk away with more than just your dignity." "That's all I want," I muttered. But that was a lie. I wanted justice. That night, the silence in the house felt heavier than usual. I sat in the living room, staring at nothing, the weight of the past 10 years pressing down on me. I had tried to be a good husband. I had given Olivia everything I had, but nothing had ever been enough. She never saw me as her equal. To her, I was just the man who paid the bills. The man she could step over whenever she wanted. The man she could leave behind. I exhaled sharply, forcing myself to stand. Enough of this. Feeling sorry for myself wouldn't change anything. I grabbed my phone, scrolled through my messages, and found the ones that had been eating at me for weeks. "Olivia, you wouldn't understand. This trip is important for me. Olivia, you're being dramatic. Taking separate vacations is actually healthy for a marriage. Olivia, don't wait up for me. Seriously, Ethan, learn to enjoy yourself." Enjoy myself. I clenched my jaw. She wasn't just going on vacation. She was running away. From me, from our life, from every problem she had ever refused to face. And she expected me to just sit here and take it. The next morning, I went to the bank and withdrew $3,000 from my 401k. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get the ball rolling. Logan had already warned me that Olivia would fight dirty. Her lawyers would make sure of that. By noon, I was at work, pretending like nothing was wrong. But in the back of my mind, all I could think about was the storm that was coming. Then my phone rang. I saw the caller ID and immediately sent it to voicemail. A few seconds later, another call, then another. I clenched my fists. It wasn't Olivia. It was her mother, Margaret. Of course, Olivia hadn't called to check in. She never did. But her mother? She had no problem getting involved. Finally, after the fifth call, I picked up. "Margaret," I greeted, my voice flat. "What the hell are you doing to my daughter?" she screeched. "She called me in tears. She can't even enjoy her trip because of you. You need to stop this childish behavior and get over yourself before she finds someone better." I smiled. "You mean Daniel?" I asked. "Tell her to go for it. I don't care anymore." There was a sharp intake of breath. Then, silence. For the first time in a decade, I had left her speechless. I hung up before she could recover. Then, I blocked her number. One battle had just been won, but the real war was about to begin. The day after Olivia left, I woke up feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. For the first time in a decade, I wasn't waking up to criticism, backhanded compliments, or the suffocating weight of never being good enough in my wife's eyes. I sat up in bed, stretched, and let out a deep breath. The sun was shining through the window, but it didn't feel warm. The house was too quiet. Even with all the fights, the resentment, and the distance between us, I had spent years waking up next to Olivia. But I pushed that thought away. I couldn't afford to dwell on the past. I had work to do. By mid-morning, I was sitting across from Logan Wells at a quiet booth in O'Brien's, a local bar known for its no-nonsense atmosphere. The place smelled like old leather and whiskey, the kind of place where truckers, lawyers, and construction workers could sit side by side without pretense. Logan was dressed in a sharp navy suit, a contrast to the rugged setting. He leaned back in his chair, watching me with the kind of expression a wolf might have when sizing up prey. "You're serious about this?" he asked, stirring his coffee. I nodded. "Dead serious." "Good." He set his cup down and folded his hands. "Because this isn't going to be easy. Olivia isn't just going to sign the papers and walk away. She's got power, money, and a mother who will drag this out just to see you suffer." I clenched my jaw. "I know. And you still want to go through with it?" "Yes." He smirked. "Then let's make this as painful for her as possible." Logan wasted no time going over the strategy. "First," he said, flipping open his leather-bound notebook, "you need to start securing your financial position. You said she controls most of the money, right?" "Yeah. She earns almost 10 times what I do, but I'm the one paying the mortgage and utilities." Logan let out a low whistle. "That's brutal, but it works in our favor. Judges don't like to see one spouse hoarding wealth while the other carries the household expenses. We'll use that." I exhaled, rubbing the back of my neck. "I don't have much in savings. I pulled out $3,000 from my 401k to get this started, but it's not enough to take on Olivia and whatever army of lawyers she hires." Logan grinned. "You're lucky I'm feeling generous." I raised an eyebrow. "Meaning?" "Let's just say Olivia's law firm and I have history. They screwed me over once. I've been waiting for the right opportunity to return the favor. If I have to cut you a deal to make that happen, so be it." I studied him. He wasn't lying. There was something dark in his expression, something personal. "All right," I said. "What's the next step?" "Tomorrow, we file for divorce. The moment that's done, we have Olivia served the second she steps off the plane. Publicly." A slow, bitter smile crept across my face. "I like that." That night, I received another call. This time, it wasn't Margaret. It was Olivia. I stared at my phone, debating whether or not to answer. She hadn't called to check in before. The only reason she was calling now was because she sensed something was wrong. I let it ring. She called again, and again. Finally, I picked up. "Ethan," she said, her voice smooth, rehearsed. "I've been trying to reach you." "Yeah," I said flatly. A pause. "You didn't answer my texts." "You mean the ones about how much fun you're having on your trip?" Didn't think they needed a response. She sighed, an exasperated little noise she always made when she thought I was being difficult. "Ethan, I don't want to fight. Can we just talk?" I leaned back on the couch, gripping the phone tighter. "All right, let's talk. How's Daniel?" Dead silence. "Excuse me," she said, her voice suddenly sharp. "Daniel," I repeated. "Your travel buddy. You know, the one who picked you up in that Mercedes I paid for." "Ethan," she hissed, "you're being paranoid." I chuckled darkly. "Am I?" She started to say something, but I cut her off. "You know what? It doesn't matter. Enjoy your trip, Olivia. You'll have plenty to deal with when you get home." I hung up. The next morning, I met Logan in his office. "Everything's ready?" I asked. He handed me a folder filled with paperwork. "Sign here," and it's official. I took the pen, my hand steady, and signed my name. It was done. Olivia Carter was about to lose the one thing she never thought she would: control. Final scene. A tropical airport. Olivia steps off the plane, laughing, Daniel at her side. A man in a suit approaches with an envelope. Process server. Mrs. Carter, you've been served. She frowns, confused. Daniel picks up the papers. His smirk fades as he scans the first page. Daniel, mocking divorce papers? Damn, sweetheart. He didn't even wait for you to unpack. Olivia's face goes pale. She reaches for her phone, frantically dialing Ethan's number. He answers after one ring. Ethan, calm, cold, lesson learned, Olivia. He hangs up. Olivia stands frozen, her entire world unraveling before her eyes. The war had begun. The first call came less than an hour after Olivia was served. I knew it would happen. Olivia wasn't the type to sit quietly after being blindsided, especially not in public. The moment she stepped off that plane and had a thick envelope shoved into her hands, the wheels had started turning. She would have called me first, of course, but she already knew how that conversation would go. So instead, she sent in her attack dog. Margaret Harris. My phone vibrated on the kitchen counter, her name flashing across the screen. I let it ring. Then it rang again. And again. I took my time making a sandwich, deliberately ignoring the calls, knowing it would only make her angrier. By the seventh call, I sighed and picked up. Margaret, I said coolly. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. Ethan, you spineless little leech. What the hell have you done? I took a slow bite of my sandwich, chewing while she ranted. Do you have any idea how much you've upset Olivia? She's been humiliated. In front of her colleagues, in front of Daniel. I swallowed and interrupted, my voice calm. Oh, so you're acknowledging Daniel? That's refreshing. A pause. A sharp inhale. I could almost see her pressing her perfectly manicured nails against her forehead, trying to regain control. That's not the point, she snapped. You're making a fool of yourself, Ethan. Do you really think you can win this? Do you have any idea what kind of lawyers Olivia has access to? You can't afford this fight. I smirked, wiping my mouth with a napkin. I don't need to afford it. I have Logan Wells. Silence. A delicious, heavy silence. Margaret wasn't stupid. She knew exactly who Logan was. She also knew that if he had taken my case, it wasn't about money. It was personal. And that scared her. She recovered quickly. Listen to me, Ethan. Olivia is willing to be reasonable. She'll offer you a settlement, something fair, but only if you stop this nonsense right now. If you keep pushing, you'll leave with nothing. I chuckled. Margaret, tell me, who's more worried right now? You or Olivia? She bristled. Excuse me. You're the one calling me, not her. That tells me everything I need to know. You selfish little. Margaret. I cut her off sharply, my patience wearing thin. You've had your fun. You've spent years controlling Olivia, controlling this marriage, even controlling how my own children see me. But you don't control me anymore. This is happening. The divorce is filed. Olivia has been served. There's nothing you can do about it. Her breath hitched. You're making a mistake, Ethan. I smiled. No. The mistake was thinking I'd let you people walk all over me forever. I hung up, and then I blocked her number. That should have been the end of it. But of course it wasn't. Margaret wasn't used to losing. That evening, she tried a new tactic, harassment. The first call came from a blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. Then another. And another. By the time I checked my phone, there were 10 missed calls. I played one of the voicemails. Margaret's voice came through, sharp and furious. You are ruining my daughter's life, Ethan. Do you understand what you're doing? She was willing to help you, and you're throwing it all away. She has a future, a reputation, something you'll never have. I deleted it and played the next one. This time, her tone was cold, calculated. You've always been an ungrateful parasite. I warned Olivia not to marry you. And now, you're proving me right. No real man would do this to the mother of his children. But I suppose we both know you were never really a man, were you? I sighed and hit delete. The next voicemail, however, was different. There was another voice in the background. He doesn't care, Mom. He's a pathetic loser. Let him go be a bitter little failure. My stomach twisted. That was Olivia. My hands clenched around the phone. So that's what she really thought of me. She had spent years dismissing me, belittling me, treating me like an accessory to her success. But this? Hearing it so openly, it burned. But at the same time, it confirmed everything. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath, and then I blocked Margaret's number permanently. The next morning, I woke up to one last voicemail. Ethan, you need to reconsider this before it's too late. Olivia will move on. She has options. You don't. You will never find another woman like her. She's the best thing that ever happened to you, and you're about to throw it all away. Just think about it. There was a long pause. Then her voice dropped, low and cruel. And if you ever think you'll see your daughters again, think again. I froze. I replayed the message. Again and again. Then I called Logan. Margaret just threatened my custody rights, I said, my voice sharp. I want everything recorded from this point forward. Every call, every text, every email. If she so much as hints at taking my kids away, I want it on paper. Logan's voice was steady. Understood. I'll handle it. But Ethan. I gripped the phone tighter. Yeah. Be ready for war. I stared out the window, my jaw tight. I already am. The first legal blow came faster than I expected. By the time I walked into Logan's office the next morning, he was already waiting with a thick file in front of him, his expression unreadable. I sat down across from him. What's the damage? He slid the file toward me. Olivia's lawyers wasted no time. They filed a temporary restraining order against you. I blinked. What? You heard me, Logan said. According to Olivia, she's fearful for her safety and concerned for the emotional well-being of the children. I scoffed. Fearful? She's on a tropical island with her boyfriend. Logan nodded. Exactly. Which is why this is nothing more than a power play. She's trying to throw you off balance, make you react emotionally. If you take the bait, she wins. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to stay calm. She was trying to cut me off from my daughters. How long does the restraining order last? I asked, my voice tight. Temporary ones like this? A couple of weeks at most, unless she pushes for an extension. That's why we need to move fast. I exhaled sharply. And what do you suggest? Logan leaned forward, his sharp blue eyes locking onto mine. We hit back. Hard. The next day, Logan filed our motion. I wasn't just going to sit back and take Olivia's attacks. If she wanted a war, she was going to get one. We petitioned the court to dismiss the restraining order, citing lack of evidence and pointing out Olivia's history of controlling behavior. Logan had gathered enough dirt to show that this wasn't about safety, it was about manipulation. More importantly, we filed for joint custody. If Olivia thought she could use my children as leverage, she was in for a rude awakening. By the time the paperwork was officially processed, it had been 3 days since Olivia was served. And that's when she finally called me. It was midnight when my phone rang. I had just finished going through some paperwork when I saw her name flash on the screen. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. But then I remembered what Logan said, always record everything. So I hit record, then answered. Ethan. Her voice was different this time. Tired. But there was something else in it, something I hadn't heard in years. Desperation. I didn't say anything. She sighed. I don't want to fight like this. I almost laughed. That's funny. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you threw the first punch. She was quiet for a moment. Then, I had no choice. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. Oh, you had a choice, Olivia. You just didn't like the idea of losing. I heard her breath catch. You're enjoying this, aren't you? I smirked. Not yet. But I will. Silence. Then, she dropped the act. You don't stand a chance, Ethan, she hissed. I have the best lawyers. I have resources you could never match. And I will bury you if you try to take my children away from me. Something inside me snapped. You mean our children? I corrected, my voice cold. She scoffed. Don't pretend like you were the perfect father. You were too busy working your dead-end job while I built a real life for us. What do you have to offer them, huh? Some old apartment and a second-hand car. I smiled. There it was. She didn't care about our daughters. She cared about winning. About proving that she was better. You know what, Olivia? I said, my voice calm. You're right. I don't have a mansion. I don't have millions in the bank. But you know what I do have? She didn't respond. I have time, I said. Time that I actually spend with my kids. Time that you were too busy working or traveling or screwing Daniel to give them. And the court is going to see that. They're going to see that while you were off building a real life, you forgot to actually be a mother. Dead silence. Then, she whispered, You're making a mistake. I chuckled. You've been saying that a lot lately. She exhaled sharply, and then, click. She hung up. I stared at my phone, my heart still pounding. This wasn't just a divorce. This was a war for my children, and I was going to win. Inside Olivia's luxury penthouse, she stands in the dimly lit kitchen, gripping her phone. Daniel enters, fresh from the shower, a smug grin on his face. Daniel, so how'd it go? She doesn't respond. She just glares at the divorce papers still spread out on the table. Daniel, laughing, you're actually worried, aren't you? She turns to him, her expression cold. He smirks, stepping closer. Daniel, don't stress, baby. You're rich, you're powerful, and you have me. He's just some nobody with a cheap lawyer. She doesn't answer. Instead, she picks up her phone again and dials a number. Olivia. Matt, I want to crush him. I didn't have to wait long for Olivia's counterattack. It came 3 days later, delivered straight to Logan's office in a thick, intimidating envelope. We sat in his conference room as he skimmed the documents, his expression unreadable. I tried to be patient, but the tension in my chest tightened with each second. Finally, he tossed the papers onto the table and leaned back, rubbing his jaw. Well, he said, exhaling. She's going for the throat. I picked up the documents and scanned the first few pages. The words sole custody stood out like a dagger to my ribs. She's trying to cut me out completely, I muttered, my grip tightening. Logan nodded. Not surprising. But it gets worse. She's claiming that you're emotionally unstable and financially incapable of providing a stable home. Oh, and her lawyer slipped in a lovely little accusation that you have anger issues. I let out a bitter laugh. That's rich, considering the only person who's been screaming into my voicemail is her mother. Logan smirked, but didn't lose his serious expression. They're setting a trap, Ethan. They want to push you, make you react, make you say something they can twist in court. You need to stay calm. I took a slow breath, forcing myself to focus. So what's our move? Logan's eyes glinted with something sharp. We fight back. The next evening, I found myself at O'Brien's, my usual bar, nursing a whiskey while I tried to process everything. I had been coming here for years. It was the kind of place where a truck driver could sit next to a lawyer, where the bartender knew your name but didn't ask questions. Neutral ground. Tonight, though, I wasn't in the mood for small talk. I was halfway through my drink when I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned and found myself looking at a man in a sharp suit. Mid-50s, silver hair, the kind of confident smirk that only came from winning too many times. I didn't need an introduction. Matthew Holloway, Olivia's lead attorney. I clenched my jaw, setting my glass down. You lost. He chuckled, taking the seat across from me without an invitation. Relax, Ethan. I just wanted to have a little chat. I leaned back, crossing my arms. I don't talk without my lawyer present. Matthew smirked, signaling the bartender. A beer. Whatever's cold. Then, turning back to me, he said, Come on, Ethan. Let's be honest. This fight. It's a waste of time. I stayed silent, waiting for him to get to the point. He took a slow sip of his beer before continuing. Olivia's willing to be generous. You drop the custody battle, and she'll make sure you're taken care of. A nice settlement. Enough to get a decent place, maybe even start over. Hell, she might even throw in a little extra if you sign a non-disclosure agreement. I stared at him. You're offering me hush money? He shrugged. Call it what you want. But let's be real here, Ethan. You can't win this. Olivia has money, power, and connections. You have a decent lawyer and a few character witnesses. That's not going to be enough. I exhaled slowly, letting his words settle in. Then I smiled and laughed. Matthew frowned. What's funny? I leaned forward, my voice low. You came all the way here because you're nervous. His jaw tightened slightly. I continued. If Olivia was so confident, you wouldn't be sitting across from me, offering me a payout. No, this isn't about me. This is about her. She's scared. Matthew forced a chuckle, but I could see the flicker of irritation in his eyes. You think you've got leverage, Ethan? You don't. Olivia is giving you a chance to walk away with dignity. I grabbed my whiskey, taking a slow sip. Tell Olivia she should start preparing. Because I'm not going anywhere. Matthew sighed, shaking his head. Suit yourself. He placed a crisp business card on the table and stood up. Call me when you realize you're in over your head. I waited until he was gone before picking up the card and tearing it in half. They underestimated me. Big mistake. I arrived at Logan's office early, running on 3 hours of sleep and too much caffeine. He raised an eyebrow. You look like hell. I tossed Matthew's shredded business card onto his desk. They tried to bribe me last night. Logan's eyes darkened. Oh, I filled him in on the conversation at the bar, watching as his smirk grew. "That's perfect," he said. I frowned. "How is it perfect?" Logan leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "Because it proves they're worried. It proves Olivia is trying to settle before this even reaches a judge. That means she knows she doesn't have the upper hand." I let that sink in. For the first time in this entire nightmare, I realized something. I had a chance. A real chance. I exhaled. "So what do we do now?" Logan grinned. "Now? We make her regret ever thinking she could buy you off." And just like that, the war took a new turn. I wasn't just fighting for my daughters anymore. I was fighting to win. The days leading up to the first court hearing felt like the slow build-up before a storm. Every move I made was being watched, every decision scrutinized. Olivia had pulled every string to paint me as unstable, and with Holloway leading her legal team, I knew they wouldn't hesitate to twist reality to fit their narrative. Logan worked relentlessly, gathering witness statements, pulling financial records, and compiling everything that would counteract Olivia's claims. He had a strategy, one built on exposing the cracks in her perfect image. But even with all the preparation, the weight of the situation pressed down on me like a vice. I wasn't just fighting for custody. I was fighting to prove that I belonged in my daughters' lives. The night before the hearing, I sat alone in my apartment, the silence stretching endlessly around me. The old couch was uncomfortable, the room too small, the walls too bare. It wasn't the kind of home I wanted for my children, but it was all I had. I thought about Olivia, about the years we had spent together. There had been love once, but it had eroded under the pressure of her ambitions, her hunger for success, her relentless need for control. I had spent so much time trying to keep the peace, to hold on to something that had already slipped through my fingers. That's what she had counted on, that I would always bend, always compromise, always be the man who took the fall so she could keep climbing. But I wasn't that man anymore. When morning came, I was ready. Court was just as hostile as I expected. Olivia sat with Holloway and her legal team, dressed in a tailored suit that screamed power. She didn't look at me once. Her expression was composed, but I saw the tension in her posture. She wanted to win, but more than that, she wanted to break me. The judge, an older man with a sharp gaze, wasted no time. He wanted facts, not theatrics. Olivia's lawyers went first, laying out their case with practiced precision. They painted me as financially unstable, incapable of providing a secure future. They brought up my old job, my small apartment, the fact that Olivia had always been the primary earner. Then came the accusations. Unreliable, emotionally reactive, a man who had never truly stepped up as a father. They submitted a psychologist's report, one Olivia had paid for, claiming the children would be better off in a stable environment. That environment, of course, was with her. I kept my expression neutral, even as the words sliced into me. This was exactly what Logan had predicted. This was their playbook. Then it was our turn. Logan moved methodically, breaking down their arguments one by one. He presented witness statements from teachers, neighbors, even a few of Olivia's former colleagues, people who had seen how little time she actually spent with our children. He exposed her financial leverage over me, the way she had dictated every major decision in our marriage, the way she had controlled every aspect of our shared life. Then came the vacation footage. Logan had warned me that it wouldn't win the case outright, but it would plant doubt, and doubt was all we needed. The judge watched the footage in silence. Olivia on the beach, Olivia laughing with another man, Olivia ignoring the phone when I had tried to call my daughters. The moment where she kissed Daniel on the cheek wasn't blatant enough to be outright evidence of an affair, but it was enough to shift perception. The air in the courtroom changed. When Logan finished, Holloway stood and tried to redirect the narrative, but I could see it, the first crack in their defense. Olivia was no longer the untouchable mother. She was human, flawed, someone who had made selfish choices. When the judge spoke again, his voice was firm. He ruled that the restraining order would be lifted immediately due to lack of evidence. I would have temporary, court-ordered visitation rights, with a full custody hearing scheduled in 3 weeks. It wasn't a victory. Not yet. But it was the first time Olivia had been forced to back down. I didn't look at her as I left the courtroom. I didn't need to. I could feel her anger, her frustration, the way her world had tilted slightly off its axis. She had expected me to fold. Instead, I had pushed back. That night, I received a phone call from an unknown number. I answered without thinking. At first, there was only silence. Then, Olivia's voice. You should have taken the deal, Ethan. Her tone was calm, but I could hear the edge beneath it. I didn't respond. You think you've won something? She continued, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. This isn't over. You don't get to walk away from me that easily. I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tighter. This isn't about you, I said finally, my voice low. This is about our daughters. Silence stretched between us. Then she exhaled sharply. You've made this personal, she whispered. I smiled, though there was no humor in it. It was personal the moment you tried to take my kids away from me. She hung up. I set my phone down, the adrenaline still burning through my veins. The fight was only just beginning, and I was ready. The weeks leading up to the custody hearing passed in a blur of tension, legal battles, and sleepless nights. Olivia had gone quiet, but I knew better than to mistake her silence for surrender. She wasn't the kind of person who accepted defeat easily. If anything, I was sure she was planning something, waiting for the right moment to strike back. Logan was relentless in his preparation. Every night, I sat in his office, reviewing documents, watching depositions, and listening to expert testimonies that he had lined up. He had managed to find a financial analyst who broke down the reality of our marriage. The imbalance, the control, the way Olivia had systematically ensured that I remained financially dependent while she thrived. He had also found a former colleague of hers, someone who was willing to admit, under oath, that Olivia had bragged about her vacation, laughing about how she had finally put Ethan in his place. That testimony was our ace in the hole. The night before the hearing, I barely slept. I lay awake in my empty apartment, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the past few months. I had fought so hard to get to this point, but I still didn't know how far Olivia would go to keep me from my daughters. The next morning, when I walked into the courthouse, I felt it immediately. Something was wrong. Logan was already there, standing outside the courtroom, his face unreadable. As soon as he saw me, he pulled me aside, gripping my arm. His voice was low, urgent. We have a problem. My stomach clenched. Olivia's lawyers just filed new evidence, he said. They're claiming you violated the court order by making threatening phone calls to Olivia. They have recordings, Ethan. I felt my blood turn to ice. That's impossible, I said. I haven't spoken to her since she called me. Logan exhaled sharply. I know, but the recordings, they sound like you. They've been edited, but to someone who doesn't know the full story, they'll seem real. Holloway is pushing for an immediate suspension of your visitation rights. I stared at him, my heart hammering in my chest. She had set a trap, and I had walked right into it. When we entered the courtroom, Olivia was already seated, looking composed and calm. But I knew her too well. Beneath that mask, she was waiting for the kill. Her lawyer stood, presenting the so-called evidence, a series of voice messages supposedly left by me. The voice on the recordings sounded eerily close to mine, filled with anger, resentment, and veiled threats. Holloway painted a picture of a desperate, unhinged man, a man who had lost control. I kept my expression neutral, but inside, I was burning. Logan fought back hard, questioning the authenticity of the recordings. He demanded an analysis, arguing that without verification, they could not be used as evidence. He brought up Olivia's history of manipulation, the way she had weaponized money and influence against me. The judge listened carefully, his expression unreadable. Then, he made his decision. The custody hearing would continue, but until the recordings were proven fake, my visitation rights were temporarily suspended. Olivia had won this round. As I walked out of the courtroom, I could feel her eyes on me. She didn't say a word, didn't smirk, didn't gloat. She didn't have to. She had made her point. She still had control. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, rage coursing through my veins. I felt trapped, backed into a corner with no way out. Olivia had used every weapon in her arsenal to break me down, and now, she had found a way to make me look like the villain. But she had underestimated me. I wasn't going to roll over and accept this. I picked up my phone and called Logan. We need to prove those recordings are fake, I said, and I want to know who helped her make them. Logan's voice was sharp. Already on it. I have a guy who specializes in digital forensics. If those recordings were tampered with, we'll find out. For the first time all day, I felt a flicker of hope. Olivia thought she had played her final card, but she had forgotten one thing. The truth always comes out. The following days were a blur of frustration, anger, and relentless determination. Olivia thought she had buried me under her fabricated evidence, but she underestimated the one thing she could never fully control: the truth. Logan's digital forensics expert worked fast. Every time my phone rang, I found myself holding my breath, waiting for the update that could save my case. When it finally came, Logan's voice was laced with something I hadn't heard in a while: satisfaction. "They're fake," he said, not even bothering with pleasantries. The voice messages were doctored using AI-generated voice cloning. It's sophisticated, but not perfect. My guy ran them through a spectral analysis, and there are clear inconsistencies in the waveform patterns. The judge won't be able to ignore this. The rush of relief hit me so hard that I had to sit down. It wasn't over yet, but this was the break I needed. Olivia had crossed the line, and now she was about to face the consequences. 2 days later, we were back in the courtroom. Olivia and her legal team walked in with the same air of superiority, but something was different. She avoided my gaze. Maybe she sensed it. The shift, the way things were beginning to tip in my favor. Logan stood, presenting the forensic report with cold precision. He detailed how the audio had been manipulated, how the voice was synthesized, how the timestamps were mismatched. The report didn't just expose the fraud. It made it clear that Olivia's team had deliberately attempted to deceive the court. The judge's expression hardened as he read through the findings. Holloway tried to spin it, claiming Olivia had no knowledge of the tampering, that she had only presented what she had been given. But the damage was already done. The judge turned his attention to Olivia, his voice steely. "Mrs. Bennett, do you have an explanation for this?" For the first time in this entire ordeal, I saw her hesitate. Her fingers clenched together, her jaw tight. She was calculating, trying to find a way out, but there wasn't one. She could throw her legal team under the bus, claim ignorance, beg for leniency, but she knew it wouldn't matter. The judge didn't wait for her to answer. His ruling came swift and brutal. The fake recordings were dismissed, and my visitation rights were reinstated immediately. The court would proceed with reviewing custody arrangements, but given the attempted fraud, it would now work against her. He issued a warning. Any further deception would result in severe legal consequences. I had won, but Olivia wasn't done. That night, she called me. I almost didn't pick up, but something told me this wasn't the kind of conversation that could be ignored. Her voice was sharp, laced with something between anger and desperation. "You humiliated me," she spat. "Do you think this makes you the better parent? Do you think this means they'll choose you over me?" I didn't respond right away. I had spent so much time being angry, fighting her, pushing back against everything she had done to me. But in that moment, I didn't feel victory. I felt tired. "This was never about winning," I said finally. "This was about them. About making sure they know their father didn't give up on them." She was quiet for a long time. Then, softer, she said, "I don't know who I am without control, Ethan. I don't know how to be a mother if I'm not the one in charge." For a brief second, I heard something real, not the ruthless, calculating Olivia, but a woman who had built her entire life on power and didn't know how to function without it. Maybe, deep down, she had convinced herself that she was doing the right thing, that controlling everything meant protecting what was hers. But it was too late for that now. "I don't care what happens to us," I said. "But if you love them, you'll stop trying to destroy me and start being the mother they need." She didn't answer, and for the first time, I didn't need her to. The next morning, I picked up my daughters for the first time in months. When they saw me, they ran into my arms, their small hands clutching my shirt, their voices filling the air with laughter. For the first time in a long, long time, I was home. Sitting on the porch, watching my daughters play in the fading sunlight, I finally allowed myself to breathe. The battle was over. Not just the legal fight, but the deeper struggle, the one where I had to reclaim who I was after years of being overshadowed, controlled, and diminished. Looking back, I realized this wasn't just about custody or proving a point. It was about standing up for what's right, even when it feels impossible. I had learned that silence isn't always strength, that sometimes walking away is the bravest thing you can do, but fighting for what truly matters, that's what defines you. For those who have lived long enough to see their share of betrayals, losses, and second chances, my advice is this: never let anyone rewrite your story. People will try to manipulate, control, and diminish your worth, but the truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how deeply it's buried. If life teaches us anything, it's that dignity and self-respect are worth more than winning any battle. Whether it's in love, family, or friendships, choose peace, but never at the cost of your own value. Because in the end, what matters isn't who wins or loses. It's who you become when the dust finally settles.